back to my YouTube channel. I am here with another astrology oracle reading for you. This is the week of October 24th, and as always, I'm using an event chart on astro.com that I've created for Dayton, Ohio at 11:11 a.m. This is giving us a 20-degree Libra moon, which will be moving through all of the degrees of Libra today, and tomorrow will be moved into Scorpio, ingressed into Scorpio for that solar eclipse and new moon. But for now, it is at 20 degrees and 52 minutes, almost forming an exact conjunction between the moon and Mercury. We also have an 8-degree Sagittarius rising, and then that sun in Scorpio is fresh at 1 degree, also forming an exact conjunction to Venus. At least at the time of this reading, shortly thereafter, Venus will be moving a little bit ahead of the sun. In this chart, we also are seeing not an exact, but a very, very close trine in terms of degree from Mars and Gemini up to the moon and Mercury in Libra. We're also seeing a trine from Mars down to Saturn in Aquarius. Now that is pretty far off in degree, 18 and 25 respectively, but that same Aquarius Saturn placement is trining the moon and Mercury at 20 degrees and 21, which is much closer. So the moon will be in an exact trine later today, was in an exact trine yesterday, I should say, with Saturn in Aquarius. And, you know, we're going to see more activity happening between Mars and Saturn as Saturn has officially completed its retrograde for this moment and will move ahead and forward into the degrees. At the same time it's going to be doing that, Mars in Gemini is going to soon go retrograde and will be moving backwards, and they will eventually meet up to form an exact trine. A couple other things I noticed in the chart is there is also a trine happening between Pluto and Uranus, and Pluto and Uranus are both creating a sextile to Neptune. So in a nutshell, there's a lot going on. There always is, right? It's kind of the theme of the last few years astrologically is visually a little chaotic to look at, in experience even more chaotic to live through. So we have a lot going on between Libra and Scorpio right now. And I do just want to briefly kind of unpack some of that energy. So with Libra, we have a peacemaker, we have the friend, we have the balance, the fairness, the justice, the equality, really of an idealistic society or even relationship. And then with Scorpio, we have transformation and rebirth and, you know, like soul purging, trauma healing. It's a very profound and deeply felt experience if you have signs, especially within your big three, that are in Scorpio for that very reason. Now, that move from that peacemaker, so to speak, that Libra can be, although we can all agree that Libra will fight and argue and stand up for what it believes in and what it values. You know, it is a Venus-ruled sign. And so anything to do with like beliefs and like ideologies, but not so much in like a religious sense, more just like, this is what I believe in and this is kind of the idea that I'm living my life around. That's all very Libran territory. And Libra is opposite to Aries, which is the most Martian fighting sign of them all. So don't put it past a Libra to not stand up for what they believe in, because they very much will, pulling from that energy of their opposite sign, Cardinal Aries. Now Scorpio is a fixed sign. Its opposite is Taurus, which is another Venus-ruled sign. So this dynamic between, you know, fighting for what you believe in is so perfectly timed in this energy. I do want to also mention, although I don't use traditional rulers for the zodiac, if I did, then Mars would rule Scorpio, which would mean that Venus and Mars are like the focal point of this axis between Libra and Aries and Scorpio and Taurus. Now, again, we're also seeing, you know, freshly ingressed energy into Scorpio. So the Sun and Venus are both at 1 degree, which is the Aries degree, funny enough to mention. but we are just going to see an influx of scorpionic energy coming in the next few days. As the moon moves forward, it's going to sync up with the sun and create that new moon and solar eclipse in Scorpio. Here soon, Mercury is also going to ingress into Scorpio. Venus is already there. And so we have, with the exception of Mars and Gemini, all of the personal planets are, making that switch from Libra to Scorpio here in the next, few weeks or few days, depending on what planet we're looking at. These are all going to be really emphasized at the time of the solar eclipse, which is going to be taking place tomorrow. And if you are on my newsletter list, you're going to be getting a special dispatch on that today, where I'm going to go into a little more detail of like my predictions and some work and things of that nature. But, again, it's very dynamic. It's fighting for what you believe in, standing up for what you believe in, and just taking a look around at the domestic and global political, socio-economic situations that so many of us are in. It's a trying time because, as I mentioned last week's video was all about the earth signs and stability, and really questioning, does your stability come at the, instability of someone else? At this point, I'm kind of feeling like, are your own beliefs getting in the way of your own stability? Which is a bit of a weird and wonky perspective, but, I think it makes sense. So many of us, especially with this fixed, Scorpio, Taurus energy, being squared by Leo and Aquarius, also both fixed energy as well. There's a sense of like, I don't want to change. I don't want things to change. I want things to stay the same because that's comfortable, it's familiar, I know how to work within that system. But change is inevitable. And there's an ironic thing with Scorpio where, although it is a fixed sign, it is also the the zodiac that's associated with Pluto, which is the planet of death and destruction and rebirth and, change and metamorphosis. And so, it is, again, it's very interesting because that fixed energy is typically like, I don't really need to do anything different here. Let's just keep things how they are. Even if I'm suffering, at least I'm suffering in a system that I'm aware of. And I know, I have a consciousness available here. We're moving away from this though, because with a solar eclipse, with a new moon, we have an opportunity. We have an opportunity first to set some intentions that will not only go through this lunation cycle, but as one of my favorite astrologers, Jessica Lanyadoo, explains in her podcast, or their podcast, I should say, we are going to feel the effects of this eclipse for 6 months. And I created a chart yesterday just because I was a little curious. Where are we going to be at astrologically 6 months from now, or 6 months from these eclipses? And we're going to see some serious shifts happening. Pluto is going to leave Capricorn and go into Aquarius. Saturn is going to leave Aquarius and go into Pisces. And these are what we call generational planets. So these are huge shifts for the collective. Pluto, again, going from Capricorn into Aquarius. There's a lot of predictions on what that could be. I'm the Libra in me wants to be very idealistic and say, we're going to transform the way that we care about, the planet and the collective and others. We're going to seek progress. We're going to seek innovation. But, there is some complicated undertones there because, Pluto isn't an easy planet to work with. It is chaos and destruction. And there is going to need to be some kind of breakdown when Pluto is involved. Kind of the same with Saturn. Saturn is all about fears and boundaries and restrictions. And, for the last 3 years now, we have all in some capacity had to deal with an outside influence putting restrictions on us. And our response to that says a lot about who we are as people. But it also says a lot about who we are as a collective. So as we see that shift from, boundaries, all around the Aquarian, all around the collective, all around the humanitarian energies of the world, we're shifting into Pisces territory, which is super spiritual, very mystifying energy when it comes to Pisces. And, to see a planet like Saturn, who really thrives in the Capricorn Aquarius territory, because it's very rigid, very strict, very, systematic, into a very otherworldly dimension like Pisces, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see what that's going to mean, how that's going to translate. But even more interesting is to come back to this moment right here, right now, to see all of those personal planets lining up in Scorpio, and to understand that, you know, what we do right now is going to inform the future. It's going to shape the future. And when we look ahead, again, 6 months from now, and can see that these major shifts are coming in the collective, I can't stress enough how important I think it is to use this time to be very intentional. You know, again, I'm constantly talking about values and, you know, beliefs and, you know, things of that nature. And again, cannot stress enough, this is the time to get in touch with your values. Not the values that were given to you by family or religion or your partner or society, but really kind of coming into yourself and doing some reflecting. Very good, you know, eclipse energies to do some reflection and really like spend some time with like, what is it that I actually value and believe in and want to stand up for? What do I want to shape my life around, so that when I look back 6 months from now, I can see that I did the work, you know? And it's work. It's not meant to be easy. So I know, bit of a rant, bit of a tangent, but it is eclipse week, so it felt very necessary. Mars will also be going retrograde this week, so wherever the Scorpio-Taurus axis falls in your chart, as well as wherever Gemini falls in your chart, these are going to be super, you know, potent indicators for what kind of archetypes and what kind of experiences you're going to be going through. And if you have natal planets in Scorpio, Taurus, or Gemini, just prepare for some change. Prepare for some metamorphosis in the next few months. Although I'm sure you've already been undergoing some of it. All right, let's get to the cards. I have pulled the lunar eclipse for this week. Now, this is not the week of the lunar eclipse, but I low-key love that I pulled this card because I have already done a video on the solar eclipse, and this is going to set us up with another one. So let's talk about it. The lunar eclipse. As you can see, what's the mantra? It's change. Of course it's change. I think the mantra for the solar eclipse is revolution, which is also change. So a lunar eclipse, this is what happens when you have a full moon, because with a solar eclipse, you have a new moon. So this is a full moon eclipse energy. And in our case, on November 8th, we are going to experience a full moon and lunar eclipse in the sign of Taurus. That eclipse is going to be overlapping Uranus and Taurus and will be opposing the Sun, Venus, and Mercury in Scorpio at that time. So I believe Mercury will be over there at that time. It's going to be pretty intense out there. I mean, my goodness. It's also, I don't know, election day, right? Like I've said this before, no big deal. No, it's a big deal. Especially when, again, let's consider everything I just mentioned, the values, the identity, the feelings, the belief systems. This is what informs people to make change and to make decisions and to, you know, do things with their life, right? Is the passion and the feeling and the values and the emotions that come with this human experience. Those are motivating. This lunar eclipse, it's not predicted to be extremely favorable, and I will have a chart, you know, closer to the date, the week of the eclipse, to get a little bit more into that, but it's not like it's very far away, you know. So the thing with eclipses is that they always come in pairs. You have the solar eclipse, you have the lunar eclipse. So in the spring, we had the solar eclipse was in Taurus and the lunar eclipse was in Scorpio. So I would definitely suggest that you look back on that full moon in Scorpio during Taurus season and that lunar eclipse and see what came up for you at this time, because that's now being met with the, you know, the new moon and the solar eclipse in Scorpio. So it's like we went from the full moon to the new moon, from the lunar eclipse to the solar eclipse, as far as Scorpio territory goes. Then we're going to revisit the Taurus. And, you know, really the Scorpio-Taurus axis is so very complicated. It's so dynamic because in one essence, it's fixed energy, right? Taurus and Scorpio, both very fixed energy, very rigid. But Scorpio is the planet of transformation and change and rebirth. And then Taurus is Taurus is a zodiac sign that is ruled by Venus, which is the planet of love and values and security. And so we have this sense of like wanting to be comfortable and wanting to be, in control of things. But in reality, we're completely out of control. Power dynamics are off and things are changing. And that has been really the theme of this eclipse cycle the whole year. And as I mentioned, eclipses are felt for 6 months at a time. So really, we've not felt the impact of the eclipses all year. Particularly if you have Scorpio or Taurus in your big three. I do. This has been a very transformational year. Endings, beginnings, when it comes to the lunar eclipse, because it's associated with a full moon, it is signified as a closure, an ending. Sometimes it's associated with death. Not to be too morbid, but it is spooky season. I was reflecting a little bit earlier about how the word apocalypse has kind of a similar, like the ending of that word, is like eclipse. And I want to do a little bit of research and unpacking on that, but I think it's very profound to consider, what eclipses have always signified spiritually. And, in ancient times, they were very much feared, misunderstood, absolutely, very Scorpio energy. But they were, struck a lot of fear in people because they're like, this is, it's the end of something, it's the beginning of something new, which has also been a huge theme for me. If you're on my newsletter or watched my videos, you have heard me talk about how endings and beginnings are kind of one and the same. And that is so Plutonic, that is so Scorpionic, it really is. And I also just want to mention, that this eclipse, experience that we're about to have is being squared by Pluto. Not chill. Pluto is the planet that is associated with Scorpio, and it's just adding more tension. Again, the idea of power dynamics, even sexual organs, birth, change, death, taxes, other people's money, all of these topics are coming up from Pluto, and they're causing us so much tension to that solar eclipse that we're going to see tomorrow. But all of that tension, is actually a little different on the Taurus side. So on the Taurus side, where we'll experience the lunar eclipse on November 8th, Pluto is actually creating a harmonious trine to that energy. So it is interesting. It's kind of like, on one hand, really kind of churning up a lot of chaos, and on the other hand, turning up just as much chaos, but archetypally looks a little softer. I mean, Uranus is not a chill planet. It is a revolutionary planet. It's very destabilizing in the sign of Taurus. And, Pluto's just like, yeah, do your thing, girl. But when the planet of death and destruction is telling the very destabilizing planet of revolution to go ahead, change is inevitable, right? It is truly inevitable. I will also link the solar eclipse video down below just so you guys can ping back to that, reference that, and take some info away from that. But, you'll see so many people talking about the eclipses this week. You've probably already seen a lot of activity around it, especially because we have that conjunction happening between the Sun and Venus now in Scorpio. I'm a Scorpio Venus natally, so I'm all here for the weird, spooky vibes. But, we can't romanticize too much what we're going through right now, because there does have to be a very real and honest approach to this stuff, and recognizing that whether or not you want to participate in the system is still going. It's still running, and, you don't have to participate, right? Nobody's forcing you to do so, but you're participating by not participating, right? It's kind of that weird dynamic between like being a fixed sign and not wanting any change, but inevitably representing change. So, lunar eclipse. Let me pull out my handy dandy little book here. And the quote here is attributed to Buddha. 3 things cannot be long hidden: the sun, the moon, and the truth. I have to also say that, Scorpio, it is the uncoverer of secrets, the uncoverer of truths. You know, sometimes those things get uncovered in a really dramatic and chaotic way, and sometimes they just come through. I mean, Scorpio is a water sign and is super intuitive, and so yeah, secrets being revealed has been a repeating message for me that continues to come up, and love that quote. A lunar eclipse takes place when the Earth is directly aligned between the sun and the moon. The Earth blocks out the sun's light, causing the moon to be in the Earth's shadow. This can only happen during a full moon. While a solar eclipse lasts for only minutes, the lunar eclipse lasts for hours. Ancient people were extremely frightened by eclipses because they believed a great serpent was taking bites out of the sun and moon. Eclipses can bring on times that seem shadowy and disordered, but they are not necessarily bad and should not be viewed as such. We are meant to be thrown off balance to make necessary changes. Again, going from Libra into Scorpio, being thrown off balance, very archetypally in line with what we're doing right now. It's a time of seeing the light, focusing on something that you've put off or didn't notice was coming up. When the lunar eclipse card presents itself, dramatic changes are in store. They'll likely be unexpected ones. Hello, Uranus. The kind that might seem hard or will take some special effort on your part. These will not be gradual, easy, or barely noticed transformations. Your world may be rattled. It will seem like a revolution, but do not be alarmed because this altering of your life is essential. We are here to share our gifts with others and lead them to theirs. It's never an easy path. Any number of things could happen. The ending or beginning of a transformative relationship, a change in life's path or job, a change in where you live, whatever it is, it's going to be abrupt. And again, this lunar eclipse that we are going to have on November 8th is going to be in the same domain as Uranus, which is going to be bringing on a lot of unexpected change, I believe. Whatever the issue, something has been brewing for a while. When it comes to partners or would-be partners, you may be wanting to take the relationship to the next level, or they may. Since the moon symbolizes our emotions, you may already have a sense for what change is coming, and you may not be completely surprised by it. But there will be a dramatic force involved. Expect to be thrown off balance. Again, we have kind of exited some of that, you know, I don't want to say stabilizing for Libra because it's an air sign, it's not very grounded, but it is trying to equalize the situation. So that equalizing right out the door. This card also indicates cycles. So whatever you feel you may have lost could be returned to you, perhaps in a different form. A couple keywords I did want to mention as well: getting hit by a curveball, radical transformations, shifts and cycles, sacrificial things and giving up habits, sudden awareness and enlightenment, changes in the eyes, taking a calm, active, and sudden approach. So, you know, again, even though this week is solar eclipse, so much of what this card represents is so scorpionic, and it makes so much sense to see it this week. So, you know, again, keep in mind where we will be from 6 months. Keep in mind where you were 6 months ago. And, you know, you don't have to do a lot of spell casting and huge spiritual work because the veil is thin and the energy is already there for you. All you have to do is sit in it and be a part of it and experience it. You know, change can be very scary. Your emotions can be scary coming from an Aquarius moon. But really, you know, this time is so great for being super intentional and very aware and very present. And really, that's all I have for you this week. I will be sending out a special edition of my newsletter today so that all of my subscribers can get a little more solar eclipse insight before it happens tomorrow morning. But in the meantime, take care of yourself, take care of others. And I will talk to you next week. Bye.